What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and today we are continuing with part 2, how to run Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen for 5th edition. Now, you all seem to really enjoy part 1, where I covered the first 4 chapters of this book and the adventure included within, and you have let me know in the comments of that video that you're really ready for part 2, so here we go. Sorry about the delay. There's been some stuff going on in the D&D fandom for the past month, if you're not aware. So yeah, but we're back at it. So Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. We are hopping into chapter 5, The Northern Waste. Now, for those of you that this is the first time viewing one of these videos, maybe go watch part 1 of this one. But if you don't feel like doing that, if you're going to stick around, great. I'm not going to go through page by page of this adventure. I'm going to cover the big things that I would call out to keep in mind, keep an eye out for, things that I would change about the adventure. This is certainly not going to be a breakdown point by point of this adventure. Just the things that I think are worth talking about. First and foremost, travel in the Northern Waste. Got a little table here. It's bad. It's broken down where slow travel in a day you go 9 miles. Normal travel you go 12. Fast travel you go 15. Except the hex map that you have, the hexes are 6 miles. The pace isn't broken up by the correct mileage. So just make it 6, 12, 18 instead of 9, 12, 15. I get that only moving 1 hex a day seems really restrictive, and maybe moving 3 hexes a day is too fast, maybe. I don't think so. I use a hex map in my home game, and I just default, if they're moving normally, they can move 3 hexes in a day. 18 miles walking isn't that unrealistic. But anyway, if you're going to do 2 normal speed, then just have 1 and 3 be the other 2 ends of the extreme, because you don't want to measure part hexes. So yeah, I would absolutely change that out of it. Additionally, part of traveling in the Northern Waste, the wash, which is where the water can come in and go out of these canyons that the players are going to be traveling through, potentially having encounters in, etc. Don't forget about it. And I would roll a D100 at the end of the first round of a combat encounter, like if you're using the random encounters in the book, and give a 10% chance that the wash activates and I roll on the wash table, just so you can have those really cool moments of like fighting canyon and all of a sudden water starts rising and rushing, and it becomes an environmental challenge in addition to a combat encounter. So just don't forget about utilizing that. And then also with the random encounters included with traveling around the Northern Waste, prioritize the malfunctioning gate encounter because it's the most interesting one. You encounter a golem and a malfunctioning arcane gate. The rest of them are just dragon army patrols or natural predators, which are, I mean, they have their place in random encounters, but don't do those and not do the malfunctioning gate, because that's the one that's actually cool. Okay, when the players land in the Northern Waste, they meet somebody named Dalamar, who is an elf. It's really important, I would say, that the PCs feel comfortable going to a secondary location with Dalamar. So, when the players are initially talking to Dalamar, he doesn't tell them everything that he knows about what they're investigating with the City of Lost Names. In the book, it does call out that, you know, if they make an insight check, they know that he knows more than what he's saying. But I would be extremely clear with the players, if they make this insight check, that when it comes to your line of questioning, there are things that he's not willing to tell you yet. That is different than he's acting kind of shifty, or he's not telling you something. Make it very clear that he is not untrustworthy, just that he doesn't trust the players fully yet, so that they will feel comfortable going with him to the secondary location. When the players go to the elf encampment with Dalamar, they meet Zelsuel, who is really interesting if played antagonistic without being villainous. Zelsuel is there for one reason only: his people. He does not care about what the player character is here for. He does not have time for them. He is there to protect his people and look out for their interests. And if played correctly, could be a noble thing that the players, while they don't like it, can at least respect that stance. So making him antagonistic might even be the wrong word, just staunch in that worldview and in that belief that that's what he needs to do, and just telling the players, like, I'm sorry, like, yeah, I get that what you're doing is important. It's not important to me. If you have a player that is playing a Sylvanesti elf, though, that could be some really interesting roleplay opportunities, because that's the people that Zelsuel is looking to protect. And so if one of his people is on this quest, then keep yourself open as a DM for there being an interesting interaction there based on that relationship. Okay, the open world section. My review of this talked about how I really like this layout of like, you know, you enter the open world section, you have multiple places that you need to go. Those places lead you to other places. Eventually it all coalesces back together at the end of the Northern Waste section. I do like that. But the way they've structured it, there's not really an ideal order because all the locations are pretty well intertwined with each other in terms of certain NPCs have been taken here and want to go back here, and another NPC at the same location wants to go over here. And so I was really trying to read through this and say, okay, here's the ideal order that I would encourage the players to do this. And there's not really a great one. I would honestly probably, you have the Blue Phoenix Shrine listed first. I would skip that and go ahead and go to the Sunward Fortress and do that one. That way Yirkle, the elf that's been captured and taken to the Sunward Fortress, can be a part of the Blue Phoenix Shrine quest with her people. But you also have Roan, who's been captured, and if he survives, then he wants to go to Heart's Hollow, which is not near Blue Phoenix Shrine. And so does Yirkle just like chill until you all are ready, because Roan is kind of hurt. So and my thought is, go to Sunward Fortress first, get Roan and Yirkle. If Roan survives, because Roan is in a bad way with the slawed egg and the players have to fix that situation, have Yirkle and Roan have grown close while being captive together. Have them develop some kind of bond over their shared trauma and their trials. And so Yirkle wants to see Roan safely delivered home. So Yirkle is more than willing to travel with the party to Heart's Hollow. And then, while the players go and do the Heart's Hollow quests that are there, Yirkle wants to stay with Roan to help nurse him back to health, make sure that he's okay. And so you can time it that by the time the PCs come back, Roan is back on his feet, Yirkle's ready to go, and then you all can head to the Blue Phoenix Shrine and do those quests over there. That's the flow that I would do. Not ideal. You kind of have to change Yirkle's character a little bit, but there's not a whole lot there to begin with. So you're actually kind of fleshing her out a bit more, just in a way that is beneficial for you as a DM to keep a narrative flow going in this open world section. Okay, everything else in the open world section, perfectly fine, run as is. When you get into the next chapter, which is the City of Lost Names, chapter 6, when the party runs into Demelin, the wizard, really before this point, you need to have primed your characters for how neutrally aligned characters operate in this world. Because Demelin, as soon as they find them, they throw an air elemental, and then after they fight them, we're like, okay, I just need to test your strength. We're cool. And I know a lot of players that would be like, no, we're not cool. But if you've really primed them for like neutral characters will operate in ways that like to a traditional person might seem antagonistic or evil, but they're just making sure that the world can continue on, that might make it sting a little bit less. Or the ideal way, honestly, is when they meet Demelin, have her say something to the effect of, I mean you no harm, but I must test your strength. Crack the gem, throw the air elemental at him, Pokemon style, and then that will hopefully have primed them to be like, what? Ha! And then once they fight it, it's like, I told you, I was just trying to test your strength. I wouldn't have let any harm come to you. I was here the whole time. Okay. Setting the book down. Demelin's test. Administering the test of high sorcery to the player characters, specifically the arcane player characters, is one of the best concepts that I've ever seen in one of the WotC published adventures, executed in the beefiest way. I'm sorry. So, first and foremost, this is the arcane players ascending to actually being recognized members of their robed order within the high sorcery. Except that they're supposed to be 8th level by this point, and guess what? They got a level 4, or they got a feat 4 levels ago that said that they were adept of that robe type. They are a member. They got the mechanical benefit, and that just doesn't make any sense. And I am a DM that has zero issues with doing story for story's sake. I love narrative stuff. But when you, throughout this book, have tied the narrative and the mechanics so closely together that then all of a sudden what would arguably be the most important moment of this player character's life comes and goes without any kind of mechanical change to their character. No, I'm sorry. That's not good design from a story standpoint. It's the biggest fumble that this book makes. Second, D&D and TTRPGs in general are all about balance, in my opinion. Now that word can mean a lot of different things. I'm not talking about the mechanical and counterbalance. I'm talking about narrative balance. What you have at this point in the, I would say, latter third of the adventure is a spotlight moment for the arcane characters in your party. Let's say that you have a standard D&D party, fighter, rogue, cleric, wizard. You are having a moment where 75% of your players are told to stop and watch. Now, normally that wouldn't be a problem if you have something for them as well, but you don't. You don't have anything for them. The arcane character gets this cool moment where they're tested to become a full-fledged member, passing the test of the high sorcery, and then you move on. And that's bad balance from a DM standpoint. You're spotlighting a player without any intention of spotlighting other players. Because also, I said 25%, because clerics don't count as arcane spellcasters because they're a different thing in the setting, which brings me to my second point. Clerics shouldn't exist in this world. You shouldn't be able to play a cleric in this game. And I know that because every video about this book that's been published on YouTube has the comment section blown up by people complaining that clerics are allowed to be in this game, which I get both sides of it, okay? From a lore standpoint, I totally understand. The fact that the gods have abandoned the world, a hugely important part of this lore. I also get that this is a D&D 5th edition book, and they're not going to omit an entire, not even single class. If we're saying no divine stuff, you're talking about eliminating 2 classes, clerics and paladins, subclasses across the board. So I get why you don't do that. I get it. Then make it a big deal that clerics are in this adventure, that paladins are in this adventure, that divine casters are in this adventure. Make it a moment. So going back to my original point, in the prologue, the Broken Silence prologue quest, they have a nice moment where they make kind of a big deal of the fact that, oh, the gods are waking up. And then that's it. You're done with that. So maybe around this point in the adventure, when they're headed into the Lost City, or maybe while they're going around the Lost City, you got a big, beautiful map of the Lost City, the city of lost names. Maybe somewhere in this map, put an ancient artifact that is from the time when before the gods had abandoned the world. And maybe when the cleric comes into range with it, not necessarily pick it up, because you never know what another player character is going to do picking it up. So just when they get within range, the cleric feels a pull to this item, and then boom, a vision discussing like why the gods left, maybe. And then also a portent of how the gods could return one day, and have the player character's cleric in the visions like the arcane caster is in for the test of high sorcery. Be a big moment. Look at the test in the book for like inspiration. You got a couple pages on the test, so look at that and then modify it to be for the cleric. Have it be tied to this ancient artifact. But what about the marshals? I hear you ask. If you have somebody going through the Knights of Salamnia like feat line, they've already gotten the final feat at level 4, which the whole way that feat system works is bonkers, but I've talked about that before. Have them find a tome or a document from the knights before their downfall, where they let down the whole world, before they let the cataclysm happen. And I've talked about one of my favorite things about the Knights of Salamnia story is this idea of holding on to traditions versus adapting to the modern world. And maybe the Marshal character could have found a tome or a document discussing from the leader of the Knights of Salamnia way back in the day, encouraging adaptation and accountability, that while the knights seek perfection, they must also acknowledge the impossibility of that pursuit. Their charge is always to listen humbly, act courageously, and learn eagerly. Something like that, so that the players become the ones with the agency in the knight's story, and they can do some interesting stuff when they get back hooked up with Darrett. It's like, hey, we found this thing, let's do some interesting thing with the Knights of Salamnia, because this book doesn't. And then if you have somebody that isn't following the gods are dead, or the gods abandon us, the test of high sorcery, or the Knights of Salamnia storyline, then, you know, just find something from their backstory that is interesting that you could stick in the City of Lost Names. Maybe if part of their backstory is like a sibling left for the dragon army, they run into them in the city. That's a big old map. Wrong page. It's a big old map. So have them run into somebody like that, or long lost love, or they find something about their family history in here. I don't know. And then reward them Give them something for this huge milestone, like the Arcane Caster, the Divine Caster, the martial character that wants to be a knight, the person just living their life. Give them something, because I'm not saying this is something you have to do with every campaign, but with this one in particular, mechanical rewards matched with narrative beats is already baked into the way they've set up this book. So continue that, because I just, the fact that they complete the test and they get nothing for it is just mind-boggling. So maybe look at the feats as they exist and beef them up to an 8th level version. Like, give them a free 8th level feat. You've already gotten 2 free feats. What's a third? Or you can give them a magic item, or the martial character found some really cool armor or a weapon with the tome. You know, get creative. Just give them some sweet loot. Give them something to signify the importance of the book. As the players are investigating the city with the big old map, do not track movement the whole way, and do not call for a stealth check every 100 feet of movement. Go from beat to beat. If you're using the random encounter table over here, then just call for a stealth check when they trigger a random encounter. Can they sneak up on the random encounter? But assume that they're moving stealthily enough as they're navigating. If you want to make a slight alteration to my rant from before, you could have like a divine caster character be the one that cleanses the Dragonlance in this chapter. I personally think that while it is a narratively important moment for the story, it doesn't carry the same narrative weight for the character. So the moment that the Dragonlance is cleansed should absolutely be a big moment and kind of fill the players with awe at this moment that's happening. But I don't think it has enough significance for the individual to warrant that being Divine Caster's big payoff. You could, but I don't think it's going to be as big of a thing as if you do the work to give them something cool in the moment where they like see this vision of the gods leaving and how they could one day return. And then once the city starts getting torn apart, really highlight the chaos of it, of like the stones, huge chunks of buildings flying up past the PC's heads. You could even do an interesting skill challenge where they hit a point where they have to like navigate the floating bits of the city hopping around in order to get to safety. The return to Calamon and the subsequent battle, I mean, you're hitting the end game at this point. So before they actually get into the siege, and maybe kind of the quiet night before the siege starts, this should be the point where you're really bringing all of the narrative threads back together. All of the allied NPCs, the rivals, personal quests, these things should all begin coalescing because you're hitting the end point of this adventure. Now, if you're doing a more long-form campaign, then disregard that. But if you're only running this should be the moment where things really start to coalesce. Also, you run back into Darrett at this point, so continue his narrative growth into a much more wise and hardened war leader. He's been going through battle after battle after battle while you all are running around doing your little quests. So, I mean, he should really be coming into his own as a leader of an army. Bakaris's defection and defeat, and then the subsequent twist related to that defeat, should have a narrative arc of course this is going to happen, to what is going on. So obviously, his son is alive. We thought he died in a previous adventure. For this thing to have a payoff, it will require the players to care about Bakaris and Bakaris' son's death, which I think you can do. I think you can play up the impact of his son dying without the players liking the person. Because Bakaris is portrayed as a blowhard politician out for himself. But the grief of a father over his son dying in a battle that he called for, and realizing that mistake, I think is something that even the most hardened player should be able to at least acknowledge is sad. So that's your build up back then, is Bakaris really feels for his son's death. And so then when it's revealed that his son is alive and has joined the enemy, of course Bakaris would go to join with his son and be with his son. And you could play up him talking about how all hope is lost. Like, I'm going to go be with my family. So this could be a really satisfying twist in the story. Additionally, if you're going to continue this game after the adventure, just because I'm not going to get into all the little battles during the siege of Calamon, try to find a way to have Bakaris the Younger live. You're in a dragon eel fight in the air with him and Red Ruin, kind of the Red Baron of the Dragon Army. And try to have a way for him to survive, because he could be a really cool campaign-long, reoccurring villain that grows in more and more power in the Dragon Queen's army, to where, like, by the end game, he's this powerful general that is kind of the foil to your party, who is in the same village with you all and has gone more and more powerful. Be really cool. The Lord Soth encounter. I was pleasantly surprised in the last video where I talked about making Lord Soth a force of nature as opposed to a beatable villain. It was really well received. People didn't give as much pushback as I was concerned that might elicit, so kudos to everyone. This can feel, the encounter in this section, the very end of the adventure, can feel really anticlimactic if not properly set up with this force of nature mentality. And you fortunately have a ghost showing up to give further warning of like, do not fight Lord Soth in battle, you will die. And continuing that and treating it like a statement of fact, and having the Lord Soth encounter be a puzzle as opposed to a combat encounter will allow it to still have that sense of accomplishment, like the players accomplished something without feeling let down that they didn't get to fight him, because you've set up that to fight him is folly, you will die. You have to find a way to deal with Lord Soth. And then I would have the escape from the Citadel be a false ending for this adventure, if not your whole campaign. If you're using music, put on the triumphant stuff as you're describing them, avoiding obstacles, hopping on dragon eels maybe, taking off towards the ground, and then boom, BBEG hits. And then Consaldi, have them talking during the entire fight, talking crap to the players, talking up the Dragon Queen, talking up themselves, the inevitability of their victory, etc., etc. Have it be that truly maniacal last villain fight. And where do you go from here? The players are about level 12. You could call it there if everybody's happy with the conclusion of the adventure, but the adventure does give you a little bit of a setup for what comes next. You get the mysterious letter from the blue dragon army, which is interesting, and you can then continue the story that way if the players are interested. But that's the important thing. This is the point where I would communicate with the players, talk to them, and be like, hey, that's where this book ends. If you all like these characters, if you like this setting, if you want to continue, let's do it. But then ask them. They have spent a lot of time in one region of this world. And there are two types of parties out there. There's the type of party who's going to want to protect what they have just fought to say. They're going to stay in this region, stay in this area, go around, continue helping their allies, building up those relationships, etc., preparing for the blue dragon army to arrive. There's the other type of party that will want to explore the rest of the world and the rest of the setting and go in the offensive to try and disrupt the blue dragon army to keep them from getting those two very different types of adventures, campaigns, and you need to talk to your players to see what they are more interested in doing. Then go with that. And you might have a mix, in which case you can establish a home base and then do missions out and return every so often back home to see the further development. That would be probably my personal preference, because you could have somebody like Darrett stay. And when they come back, you can see Darrett like continue with these time jumps, developing into somebody that is potentially a future leader of a nation or the Knights of Salamnia or whatever. So yeah, that's how I would progress from that point. And that's it. I hope you enjoy this how to run Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. And when you finish up this adventure, if you're looking for perhaps a new system to try, check out this video where I talk about all the different non-D&D systems that I'm interested in trying.